Okay, they're good. Okay, we're gonna try the first question.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys already did it. Okay. So first question, what is your role within your organization? So the categories again are HR, technology or IT, operations, workplace, change management, service providers. Okay, we have a lot of service providers in the room. Next question. Okay, describe the industry your company is in one word. I love how you just voice commanded that. Okay, equal. We've got creative, pharma, furniture.
Owner's project manager is not one.
Okay, lighting, consulting, manufacturing. Okay, so basically a good mix. It's okay, Denise. Okay, great. We're gonna go to the next. Okay, what is the weekly pattern of your employees coming into the office for your organization? It's not necessarily about what you are doing personally, but kind of like, you know, maybe what your company policy is, or on average, what people are doing. Okay, so the front runner right now, which is very interesting, 3 to 4 days a week has an edge on 1 to 2 days a week. So kind of anywhere between 1 and 4. Okay, great. This is very helpful. Next question. Okay, are people at your company coming in to the office more or less than before the pandemic, or maybe about the same, right? So we have a lot more, a little bit more, about the same, a little less, or a lot less. That a lot less is creeping up. Yep. Okay, so a lot less and a little bit. Okay, so okay, and the last question, yeah, just kind of the meat of this conversation is how closely does workplace or a change management team work with IT and HR? Are they working together and coming up with solutions? So again, are those 3 workplace, IT, HR not working together at all? Is workplace working with just IT? Is workplace working with just HR? Or is everyone working closely together? And this is great to see part of this conversation. The many saying all work closely together. Thank you. This is great. Okay. So now we're going to get into the meat of these lovely ladies. So before they introduce themselves, as part of the introduction, I'm going to just start by opening it up with a question, actually a two-part question. So what do you guys think motivates people in returning back to the workplace? Number 1, or I should say part 1. And part 2, what is the role that change and change management plays in addressing that motivation? So Katrina, you can start. Hello, am I loud? Am I good?
You're good.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katrina Peterson, and I work with my colleague Karen here at one of the top 10 banks in the US. It's my 3rd top 10 mega bank, and I most recently managed our return to office project. Mostly in 2022, I still get a little bit of lingering around that, but I love your questions because I have definitive answers since I was the change manager on that project. And I can tell you that we surveyed people a lot. We talked to people managers, we talked to colleagues, And, excuse me, the motivation is collaboration. It's not that people don't want to come in, they want to come in, but they want reason to come in. They want to see other people. They want to do something productive with other people. The last thing they want to do is sit at an open desk on Zoom calls all day. It's part 2.
Yes. Role of change, the role of change management and addressing that
I
motivation.
think it's really critical because it's so much about bringing people together. And what we found is our business lines, they sort of say, okay, come into the office on Tuesday. And then you come in and there might or might not be other people there. And there might be no reason for you to be there. So it's really about developing a plan for the day. You're coming in at 9, what are you doing at 9? What are you doing at 10? What are we doing for lunch? And I think that is a critical piece that change management really needs to get involved in to help the business side understand that the people need to be led in what they're doing when they come back.
Really nice, thank you. And we do work together. My name is Karen Gill, and I've been in charge of enterprise change management for a couple of financial institutions, as well as large technology institution. And I've been leading the world of change around workplace for a long time. So if you ask me what brings people back, the behaviors, I really think it has to do with purpose. And I think it has to do with purpose from the organization all the way down to the person. And I've been talking to a lot of people within my organization, but in other organizations as well. And my young niece the other day said to me, yes, they've had to come back 2 days a week, and she absolutely loves it. But I turn around and I'll talk to somebody else in a different situation, and they never want to go back. So what really motivates people to go back, I think, is a little bit beyond collaboration, if I may. I think it is more about the socialization first and foremost, and also the purpose of the work that they're doing here. And I don't mean feeding them donuts, and I don't mean, bringing about happy times for them or even moments that matter. I really do think, and I helped design this in one of the organizations I was working in, as we moved from regular work to Agile Scrum, and designed the organization to adapt to the different routines, so that as people came back, those routines were fulfilled within the environment, and people really gathered together in the right atmosphere with the right tools to be able to do the work that they needed to, and could socialize a little bit too. So that's what I think.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Bethany Davis. I am Senior Director of Workplace Strategy at the Boston Consulting Group here in Boston and the Seaport. And some of you have seen our space. And I have to share regrets from my colleague, Lee, who was meant to be here. She's a director in our IT group, but she had a bit of a car issue on the way here and wasn't able to make it all the way down from New Hampshire. So she sends her regrets, but I'll try to do my best to represent her point of view as well, because she and I work very, very closely in coming up with solutions to support our team's hybrid work. So in terms of for Boston Consulting Group, and I would say that this is true for myself as well, my own personal opinion, I think people are motivated to come to the office. Well, let me say, people come to work at Boston Consulting Group because it's a place where people learn and grow, and especially early in their careers, they're with others, really smart people, and it's just, there's a vibe about being there that's really helpful. And so that's why people come into our office. We had a lot of our, especially our younger colleagues, who were really, really dying to come back to the office after we were remote for so long, because they joined to be a part of a team and to come up with solutions for their clients together. We call it shoulder to shoulder. That's how we worked before the pandemic, and it's how we work now. It's not every day, but it is, it's that, so it's kind of a combination actually of what you both said. It's about collaborative work, it's about purpose, and it's really about the people that you see when you're in the office is where you get the energy sense that makes you want to come back. At least that's what we find within BCG. And so we do actively try to curate activities in the office, get leaders to make sure that they're present in the office so that they can be seen and encourage their teams to come together, because all those different influences really make for the right kind of the vibe is what I know my younger colleagues always talk about in the office.
And I forgot about change management, and I think you did too. Like, what role does change management play? I'm asking you now.
So, thanks, Karen. So for us, change is really embedded in our management practices. So we don't have a traditional, well, we do have a traditional HR, but those people are doing more the policy, but we have a group called the people team. And we have a whole culture around coaching our teams and how to work together now in a hybrid way. It was just how to work together before. So we, every client service team has a coach that works with them to establish practices like how many days a week are we going to be at the client? How many days are we going to be in the office? When are we going to be remote? How, and all the different norms of behavior too. How do we communicate with each other? Is it on Slack? Is it by phone? What hours am I available? Things like that. So that's part of our change process, is the coaching with each team as they get established to work with each client.
Really nice. And I just want to add to both of what this lady said. I also think you have to look at the organization, the culture of the organization. Where does that culture want to go? And change management really has to put their wagon to that trail and make sure you adhere to that. And if you don't agree with it, you bring that up and you bubble it up, but you help an organization become the organization that it wants to be through its culture.
So, sorry. So actually, thank you. That was all really great. And I'm scribbling over here because I have all these thoughts and other questions like popping into my head. So I'm gonna stick with a few just kind of like, I guess we're all kind of calling policy or HR. I like, Bethany, how you said kind of the difference between having people teams versus like HR and policy. So I guess I have a question for, I'll start with you, Bethany. And I know BCG has been doing this journey for a very long time. So I don't think I'm going to talk about kind of a little bit of that evolution, but I'm curious, like, who started the conversation again of the people team, HR, workplace, IT? Was it really a collaboration, or was it someone on the workplace side walking into the HR department's office and saying, hey, I have this idea, or we need to do this? Can you talk a little bit about how that started, I guess? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're talking about the return to office in particular. How did that start?
Yeah.
So maybe it helps to give a little bit of background so our BCG offices, so I joined BCG 11 years ago, and my purpose in creating the role was to create a workplace strategy. And part of that was to move us away from what had been all assigned workplaces before. So we had already been on a journey for 8 years, whatever that was by that time, to redirect our workplace experience to be an activity-based approach as compared to assigned spaces. I say that because we didn't have the imperative that some organizations had, which was they could see that people weren't coming back every day, and how were they going to use all this space that they had because they had assigned spaces for everyone. We already had broken that connection, the one person, one space. For us, so BCG is a partnership, so we're not a corporation. And for us, the real driver came from the partners, the leaders of the company. They said, it was maybe 2 weeks into the pandemic when we already started saying, this is one, going to last a while, and two, completely fundamentally going to change the way our teams work. And so the first phase, of course, was just jumping into how do we support our clients remotely when the the practice up until then had been go to your client 4 days a week, be with them on site, and then come back to the office on Friday. So they had to figure that out. And the moment that we figured that out and got into the groove of that, we realized that people weren't going to come back to the office the way that they had in the past. So it was really a collaborative effort. I would say there was a leadership team, the C-suite essentially kind of setting some direction. And then we gathered together IT and the people team and the workplace team to talk about what's, we didn't have to totally overhaul the workplace, but we are making adjustments. And certainly the whole question of how do we, so much more on the operations and services side, what do we need to provide to people when they're coming in a different way than they had before. So now they're coming in to do the teaming that they used to do only at the client site. So what we provide in the office is different. And then it's also not just a Friday, come back and socialize kind of pattern. It's being built into the whole week. So it was really led from the top, but we all worked together to develop the solutions.
Thank you. Karen, do you want to take that for some of your experience?
Yeah, so I have to agree that it was led from the top. And with where I was, it was more HR led. But what I noticed is that workplace strategies and designers and design engineering, the whole workplace team have always worked with HR, IT, and all of the other components. So it was that team that was kind of the glue to help HR and IT within the organization maneuver through all of the return to work. It really was. So without that, I think they would have been a little lost. But even on the major program that I'm working with right now, we are now working with HR, IT, and everybody. So there was a lesson learned there that we're all coming together with change management now in a very easy manner because of all of this.
Well, I will just echo what both Karen and Bethany said. It was absolutely all hands on deck effort. Every single call we had on a weekly basis, there was HR, there was someone from real estate, there was someone from workplace, and it was what can we do to make this happen in the best way. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Can you guys also, I think, talk a little bit about what tools or things you're doing in the workplace to support these behaviors? I don't know if you all have done any, tests or pilot programs. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Being quite a large financial institution, we have tests galore. We have tons of technology. We have official programs for things like just learning how to use Microsoft Teams better, or OneNote, or we've got an official, I think we're calling it work enablement. Tips on hosting hybrid meetings. We really have tried to do the work to give people the tools. Of course, it is also up to people to know that those tools exist and to utilize them. So we're out there, we're trying it, but I think it comes back to the change management piece where you can create great websites, you can create great videos, but unless you have a good plan for rolling that out to people, it does fall a little flat. So we're seeing we really need to have that change management component to plan on how we're going to engage people in those operations.
And so I'm going to give kudos to Katrina because with the program, what she created was a manager's toolkit. We are a large organization and we couldn't do it all. We really couldn't. So the kit that she created for the managers gave them everything that they needed at their fingertips. It was all of the technology. We had to learn about the technology, all of the training on return to office, what it meant, all of the information around, where you would go, what you would do, what were the rules at the time. And because it was a 3-page deck and only a 3-page deck, and it linked to a web page, it was dynamic. So it always changed and it was never outdated. So kudos to you for creating that. And that was a tool that we used, that was widely accepted, and the teams and the managers loved it.
Sorry, I'm gonna riff off of that for just a second, because I forgot about it. But that really was critical because we are so big, we had so many things, so we had to distill it down. And really what we did was we did session upon session, I think we did like 30 something sessions with people managers. Where we literally just say, this is what we call if you have real estate questions, you have tech questions, you go here, if you want to work on your team norms, so Bethany, you talked about that, you know, what are our in-office days? Do we do meetings 9 to 3? You know, what are our rules around how we work together? It was important to consolidate all of that into one place because you can easily get lost.
And maybe just to talk about a different part of what we're testing, we're doing a lot of, and this is what Lee would have talked about if she was here, so another person talking about the IT side. We've been testing a lot of meeting room configurations, both with the technology that's there, the layout of the room, which tools are, you know, we have to support, because we always want to talk to whatever our clients' tools are, we have to use Zoom and Teams and Blue Jeans and you name it. So we have a series of what her team refers to as test kitchens that we've identified a room in a bunch of different offices where we've been able to put a new table in the space and some of the newest, like, so we're kind of on an ongoing rolling basis updating the AV technology in a lot of our rooms. So, you know, taking what would have been a standard meeting room with a table in the middle and instead changing the orientation more toward the camera and the screens and testing every little detail of it, the acoustics, the microphones, you know, can you get all the seats on the camera, you know, in the camera, because often you end up with chairs that are too close to the camera and people aren't on camera and that ruins the experience. So we've been doing a lot of this kind of testing as well, which has really been well received by our staff. You know, like we bring teams in and say, sit here for 2 days and try this. And it's really been helpful in managing that change too, because our people resist being trained to do anything. It has to be intuitive, and if they've been asked to just kind of come in and work there and see how it works, it's a good way for us to know that it is fairly easy for them to just pick up and work that way.
And I just want to re-mention what I mentioned in the very beginning. When you think about Agile and you think about all the different routines, and you think about bringing people back to work, and you think about those routines, can you imagine a stand-up happening here, or bringing a whole team back, rearranging maybe parts of your walls or whatever, and having learning day or a major ceremony with your whole team? So prior to this position, I worked with a group of designers that would give the freedom and flexibility of the entire building to what was happening within that building. And what was happening within that building was scheduled on an ongoing basis through technology. So people knew exactly where people were, people knew exactly what to do when they got there. And there was always free space for those people that just wanted to come in for hands down or a cafe bite of, you know, brownies and coffee or something like that. But if you, again, use the tools that you can gather and apply it to the ways of work within your organizations, and then clear out the space for the whole team to come in, or partial space for half the team and things like that, you might find that people come in more because they're coming in for that purpose.
So, kind of going off of what Karen, you just said there, can you talk a little bit more about how your organization, or what your organization is doing to understand kind of those behaviors and needs, and maybe a little bit about, like how long a time period is to test things, or Bethany, either one of you, yeah.
Sure. So we, I think like most organizations, we're constantly trying to investigate how our people work. And the biggest challenge is getting them to give us the time to really understand what they're doing. So we do surveys and we do lots of focus groups and interviews and things like that, where we test out persona. We have planning personas that we use, and so we're constantly updating that. But we do it both separate from projects. A lot of it is done in the planning of the next project. So as we're doing projects around the country, around the world, we use that opportunity to engage end users and talk to them about what they need, and use that to update our knowledge base. And then when it comes to these specific, like the test kitchens, we try to have them in place for a couple of months at a time with a configuration, and then we might tweak it a little bit. Depends. If we know that something is definitely not working, we'll change it more quickly than that. But we try to give it enough time so we can cycle different teams through that space. But typically a team is only using it for a day or two at a time before we get their feedback, and then that way we can get multiple people to use the space and give their feedback.
Yeah, I think an organization has to have a workplace strategist for somebody that understands the full gamut, the behaviors of the workplace, how to work with designers, how to work with engineers and everything, in order to be able to even understand what they have to test and then bring it to fruition. And I honestly believe that many organizations are missing that golden piece. I think change management and profession of change management has blossomed over the last 5 years. I'd like to see workplace strategy kind of blossom with that. So as far as testing and all of that, I wholeheartedly agree with Bethany. And it's really good to do all those tests, but unless the organization is set up to do it and do it well, the test won't work.
Yeah, and just to play off of that, I can say that at our company, almost said the name. We have so many different configurations. Unfortunately, right before the pandemic, we had just finished a major renovation where everything went open desk. And we eliminated almost all the conference rooms, all the offices. And so there was very, very little collaborative space. And what we're finding now is that is probably the worst thing we've done just prior to the pandemic. So it's swinging back in the other direction where we really need, right now our rooms are set up. You're supposed to go in the room. You're supposed to leave at the end of the day, take everything with you. And there's a building I go into frequently, and I can tell you some of those spaces have been completely taken over. You know, there's somebody doing a web development redesign and they've got screenshots printed out, and I've been there for the last 6 months. That stuff is up there every time I go in. You know, they've taken over this room, and I understand why. The work they're doing absolutely makes sense, and I wouldn't want to take it down at the end of the day. So we're really seeing, you know, unfortunately what we did doesn't really now match up with the space that people need. And so even the technology, we're constantly redoing the technology, but it's just, we've got a lot of buildings, we've got a lot of space, and we need to now kind of pull back and undo what we did before. So we are testing, and we're using a lot of hybrid technology. It's also about education, because you know, you go into a room and there's this screen and not everyone's familiar, and they don't come in enough to become familiar. So
I realized actually with the Moderator, since none of us have phones up here on the panel, we probably didn't answer kind of again what your companies are doing or seeing as far as number of days a week in the office as a pattern, and is it more or less the same as pre-pandemic? So I'm gonna ask you guys that question, and then I'm gonna open it up to the audience for questions and see if anyone on the Zoom has questions. And then I do have one parting before wrap up question.
so many different work styles. Obviously, being a financial institution, there are some jobs you just cannot do remotely. You have to be there, you have to physically be in the space. The majority of people, however, are now on a 2-day flexible hybrid working situation. We find that the people, we've done surveying, and what we found is those are the happiest people. Either the fully remote people, and interestingly, the people that come in 5 days a week are happier than the people that are forced to come in 2 days a week that are mandated days. Which was a really interesting thing, right? You would think, hey, you don't have to come in 2 days, it's not so bad. But being mandated as to which 2 days you do different things really impacted people for whatever reason. We don't know the reason yet. We just know that it does. So it's something we're still looking at as we get the data, get people back in.
Yeah, when you think about people and how they work, there are labs, there are pharmaceuticals, there are people that need to be in the office, as you said, all the time. We do have that. I honestly think it's just flexibility, a little bit of freedom, bringing people back to that purpose, and you find the right mix, you will. I'm not against mandating certain days, and sometimes people really fall in love with that. I really am, and I'm not talking about the organization that I'm working at now. I'm talking about what I see out there. And then you have organizations that are asking everybody to come back 5 days a week. And that's the one thing that really is not working from my point of view. It really is not. They're not getting people there 5 days a week. So why even do it? I don't know. It's still a question. We're still working through it. But I think an organization has to stand strong with who they want to be and embrace their people that way.
I think what I'm hearing you say is it's important to make sure you explain why, whatever the policy is, can you back it up with why this makes sense? And then it's just easier for people to accept. At BCG, our general guidance for the client service side of the organization, which is like 70+% of our people, is that teams should be spending half of their time together. That time could be together in the office, or it could be time at the client site. We're not specifying that. And then the rest of the time can be remote, or that the team should decide. So it should depend on what your client needs. And basically the team decides together. That's what this coaching thing helps people to do. But it works out to be about half of the time. And as a result, that actually means that our people are in the office more right now than they were before the pandemic, because it used to be that they would only come in on Friday and not everybody came in on Friday. And the rest of the organization, which is like back office, HR, finance, technology, things like that, people are in usually a day or two a week. And again, the team sets that pattern. But if I could just say one other thing, we were talking in the section across the way earlier about this idea of mandating days of the week or whatever. And I said to someone, Catherine, that I always have this feeling that we always talk about the fact that people hate change. I do not believe that at all. I think people change every day. They change in many, many ways, right? When it's their own personal motivation. What they hate is, or what they resist is imposed change. And I would say especially imposed change where you don't know the reason why. So I think that's what we should be thinking about whenever we come up with any sort of policy for people that's going to implement a change.
And that's the basis of change management, right? It's uncovering the why. And I noticed on the poll that everybody was saying that they're in a lot less right now. And that might be true, but I want us to remember back pre-COVID, our buildings were 40 to 60% full at the most. So perception, reality, what really was it before, and where are we going?
It's a great point, Karen, right? Because we were talking earlier as well. Before, maybe we were tracking it, but maybe not as much. And I think now everyone is tracking it probably more so. And now that there's more numbers, it looks scarier, but like you said, maybe it was very similar, so it's a really interesting point.
That's actually one of the things we've heard in surveying people is they feel like they are under more restrictions now than they were prior to the pandemic. Because prior to the pandemic, they had flexibility, they came in when it made sense, they just sort of self-organized. And now all of a sudden it feels like I'm just being mandated and told this and don't know my why. Especially like if you have a team where someone's in Maine, someone's in Florida, someone's in New Jersey, and you know, you get told, well, go in to meet new people, and then you go in and there are 10 people in a building that's supposed to hold 1,000. That doesn't really sit well with them. So especially in sort of those probably similar to the work we're all doing, those types of positions, people have opportunity and flexibility, and they really don't like being more restricted than they were prior to.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take the first question from the Zoom participants. So is there a process or survey that collects how teams work over the course of the day, and that would add up what kind of space people need? I don't know which one of you wants to take that. No.
At least not, I mean, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't mean to be clear. I mean, the reality is that it's a very complicated thing. So like we have a model that we use to lens what our space is and how many different types of spaces, and it takes our head count and then attendance of those people, and then this persona that I mentioned before. So we know that different people work in different ways. So we map our people to different personas, and each of those personas needs a different mix of people, of spaces. And then that, based on our attendance pattern, gives us an idea of what. So it's an algorithm. It's not easy to use a survey to do that because, you know, in my experience, people know what they do when they come to the office. They're often not really good at estimating how much time they do spend in the office when you think about that, like what Karen was saying about what people did before the pandemic. But a survey is only going to get you certain input. I think studying and like these focus groups and things like that to understand what are the personas, the day in the life of our people in the office, it takes, at least in my experience, a deep investigation into that to try to figure out the mix of settings that we need.
I agree with that. And I think it also takes a lot of observation and just silent sitting as you watch people work. And then you marry all of this up with how you want them to work, or what are they really trying to accomplish. Once again, going back to the different, and I'm knee deep in agile right now, so forgive me a little bit, but the different routines and the different ways that you want to get people together or to separate. So think in those terms and think about how people are working, and then think about how you might help them work a little bit better, a little bit easier, be they in your space or virtual, because it has to happen now in both ways.
So there is a tool that Microsoft has that's called Microsoft Viva. So I don't know if this question is about, you know, globally, like, are you managing a team and you're trying to do this for a team? Or are you doing this for an organization? And depending on the privacy concerns at your organization, but Microsoft Viva does take a deep dive into what people are doing with their time and their calendar. Are they on Teams chat? Are they in meetings? Are they doing quiet focus time? So I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it is an organizational. And if you look, Microsoft actually published a white paper where they talked a lot about work habits, and they are doing a lot of work in that space. So I'm not sure who asked the question, but if you Google like Microsoft white paper working habits, you'll probably, it's got a lot, it's pretty in-depth.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to the in the room audience. If anyone has any questions.
All right, I took notes, or else it's be a long tangent. It's kind of off topic, but no, not as.
So the people get home.
So the people at home can hear you.
People at home, I took notes. And it's kind of off topic, but Karen, it was based on a little snippet that you had said that organizations need workplace strategists for success in pilots, understanding behaviors, interaction with the holistic workplace ecosystem, et cetera, but most lack. So that's something that I've been trying to understand. I also think that's the same with change managers in the same space. A lot of companies have OCMs, but not the SMEs of workplace hybrid. So this is just a why. If there's a recognized need for this, which you said that like there is, why aren't companies trying to create this leadership role to drive that strategy internally?
It's a great question. I went to polling contest at camp, so I don't need.
I don't think any of you have the answer. I'm just interested in your thoughts because I've been.
Yeah, and maybe you can answer it. Do you want to try answering it? I'd love to hear what you've been thinking, because to me, it's about education and it's about knowledge. And when a company, when a company understands the benefits, they're gonna get them. And you know what? There's a lot of cost saving benefits in this, as well as a lot of thought provoking. Good change.
I feel like we should go to the after this. So transparently, I've just previously led workplace experience. So as the director of workplace strategy and change management for a large financial institution, that got acquired by another financial institution. So I'm looking, and I think there's a fear that the leadership required comes at a high cost, which it does, and that's not a cost to bear in an economy that is heading towards or is in fear of a recession, when in reality a role like a workplace strategy and change management lead, I believe, would save more money in the long term. You know, a salary of X is pennies compared to people leaving and looking elsewhere in this economic climate. I don't think, as a job seeker, I think that, the falseness of, unemployment's at a low, there's a million jobs out there, like that is true if you're not a leader. So what I'm seeing is this fear of taking on leadership roles in a recession and saying that something so strategic and pie in the sky, and people will figure out this strategy on their own. They did it, they adapted, they'll continue to adapt, is a fallback for the reality of, people aren't adverse to change, they're adverse to the unknown, and they're adverse to heading into the unknown on their own.
I couldn't agree more.
That's that.
Does anybody else? I thought so.
Hi, have any of you encountered like senior leadership where they're opposed to any kind of hybrid? They want their team there as much as possible because they have a more traditional way of mentoring or teaching, and what kind of approaches have you dealt with working with those kind of individuals, which seem to be a little bit smaller in number than they used to be? Just curious to see how you dealt with, trying to make everybody happy.
Can I just add to your question too, from some questions that came in on Zoom? There are kind of a part two to that, which is about like management training, right? And supporting, bonding and onboarding, and is that in person versus virtual? And also any kind of requirement for newer, like younger professionals to be in their office with their managers. Kind of that a little bit goes back to kind of the mandate, but again, I think Karen, you had mentioned about like your niece, right, and being very excited about going back, right, and like a younger, right, but again, you need the managers, you need the leaders of the firm to be there also. So I feel like that's kind of all sort of inclusive.
I don't have any experience actually with any of our leaders that are saying that our people should be in 5 days a week, but that's really, I mean, other than, I mean, honestly, the people that are in 5 days a week are our receptionists and our office services staff, and that's about it. Because we had that culture before the pandemic as well. So I'm sorry, I can't give you any concrete experience in that way. But I do think that the whole management culture and coaching and like learning how to establish this more hybrid way of working for a longer period of time is something that we've really invested a lot. I talked about the coaching. We also have a whole series of training and onboarding for everybody. So for our new staff about what it's like to work, together with these teams, but also for our managers. Sorry. Or any companies who lost it.
They were talking about,
Oh, yeah.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll pass to you, but for us, DEI is definitely part of why we want people to have more flexibility about where they work, to have a more, access to a more diverse workforce and give people more flexibility to be able to handle whatever their particular needs or requirements are. That is part of it as well.
Sorry to jump there. It was just like right behind your head. Okay, so as to the question of 5 days a week, we have like a few pockets, but again, we have some people that need to be in, but what we're finding is people, they just don't go. They don't want to go, they just don't go, and they're at the point, most people are like, you know what? I get fired, but that comes with it is if you make that mandate, what are you going to do? Are you actually going to put that hammer down and let those people go? That's kind of the other side of it. But I think going in with what Bethany said, and then that question that came up is that's a work style that works for a certain population. Most particularly people who have a partner that can support them at home. This is something that's near and dear to me. So I think it really does tie in with DE&I. All the statistics show that people that are in certain populations feel much more comfortable at home. It's now coming out that couples that work mostly remotely are having more children. But it's true, it's what's happening, and that's insane. I mean, there's some of the things that are starting to come out now, along with, we all know that, women traditionally do more work, unpaid work in the home, when they find that when the couple works at home together, that parity starts to actually come up and become more. So there's a lot of reasons that flexible work that I think you can use. I don't know if that's like a personal, like someone you're working with is saying it must be in 5 days, but there's so much evidence that flexible work is good for everybody. And it helps you retain employees, it helps you retain a more diverse workforce. So I think there's a lot of meat that you can put behind, here's why you don't want to do this, and that your workplace will, suffer for it.
Sorry, can I just add one thing? So while we don't have this at BCG, we participated in a group called Future Forum. And if you want some evidence to be able to use for that kind of an argument, if you Google Future Forum, and I think it was a report that was done in February of 2023, it talks about the attraction and retention benefits of, and just employee satisfaction benefits of more flexibility about your work schedule.
So the technology company that I worked for, it was huge. Probably about 8 years ago, way before COVID, dictated to their people that you will be in the office 4 days a week. You will be in. And the CEO used to take little red sticky notes and go around to the desks in the headquarters and write on, where are you? Where are you? I kid you not. This is a major technology company in Palo Alto. How'd that work for them? It did not. They lost their top talent, okay? Because they did have that. If you didn't come in, you were fired. And so the minute that person stepped out, the new head retracted that, and now it's a happy company. So I do say there is something to do with flexibility, but I also do think that there is something to do with responsibility. of the people and the work that you have to get done. And if you cannot work in a hybrid environment, or if you cannot work not coming in, then that bus might not be right for you.
Okay, so I'm gonna take one more. One more question from the audience. Lily's giving me the time's up. Okay, go.
So, my question is about surveying employees and feedback. So, several of you talked about testing different things, testing different spaces. What have you found to be the most effective way to obtain that feedback?
We did a lot of different methods, but one of the most effective was focus groups. And we purposely separated frontline colleagues from people managers and leaders. And we did this so that there was a safe space for everyone. And we made it really apparent and open in leading with the feedback we had already gotten from others. So people felt comfortable. Again, splitting the groups up, that helped, giving them the prior feedback. And what we found was it's like super 50-50. You either were like, yes, I can't wait to go back, I'm super excited, or you were like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And people wrote things like that. They wrote like super honest, like this is the most terrible thing. I mean, things that I have never, I worked at 3 giant banks and I could not believe the honesty that was coming out of people. So I highly recommend focus groups, and they don't need to be in person. You can do them on like WebEx and Slido or any whatever survey tool of your choice. But you do have to lead with, this is a safe space. And I know that's kind of a loaded terminology, but really giving people and saying, this is what we're hearing already. So please give us your honest feedback. That's why we're here. And that worked really well. It was more honest than the sort of email survey.
Yeah, surveys are fine, but you have to take them with a grain of salt, and you really have to mix it up. You have to take the surveys, the focus groups, the one-on-ones, the roundtables, and things like that, and kind of analyze the question, the situation, the question, the demographic that you're asking, and then put all of that together to really come up with an answer. I don't think personally surveys are the best. I had a CEO once find out who did what survey, even though it was. Do you think I'll ever trust another one in my life? Never. So, and that's, probably something that doesn't happen often, but I'm sure it goes through people's minds.
And maybe just to add to that, so we do a lot of surveys at BCG. I think most organizations do. My personal feeling is that surveys actually only tell you what questions you really have to ask. So you can get the trend line for the data from a survey, and that's great. But often you realize when you look at the answers, oh, now what we really need to do is dig on these particular questions. And so that's where the focus groups and the one-on-ones and things like that really provide some value.
So quickly, parting words, do each of you have one piece of advice for organizations that might just be starting out on this journey or might enhance the journey?
I think it's been said quite a few times already, but the quote I really like is, it's not that people don't like change, it's that they don't like surprises. And I'll add to that, they want to feel in some control. So we talked about that a little bit. And so my piece of advice would be, no matter what work style or what kind of workplace you're developing, is to give people a voice. And whether or not their voice is going to have a big impact, just the fact that you're asking them and you're letting them vent is something that helped us get through that. So I would say give people a voice, let them provide feedback and have those discussions.
Okay, I think I'll stand to a couple of things, and one is to really define behaviors that you. On change management, I am big on the hearts and minds of change, and being big on the heart of the people. So define the behaviors that you want to achieve. Make sure it's where your organization wants to go, and help people along that path. You will get there.
And we feel like we're just building on each other. I would totally agree with that. I think what we try to do, being management consultants, is like, what are we going to measure? How are we going to measure success, right? So think about how the culture and the goals of the organization translate into behaviors. And that, because people always ask you, how will we know people will be more productive, right? So we can't measure that really in most cases in knowledge work, but we can measure behaviors. So we can say, if you can get people aligned with, if we can see these behaviors happening in the office, we would feel like that's a measure of success. That's what we tend to focus on. And again, it ties back to the culture and the why. So don't think that what some other organization is doing is the right answer for you without being able to tie it back to that why.
So thank you very much. Let's give these lovely ladies a round of applause. Thank you for everyone for coming in. It's making the virtual books. Thank you all for coming.
That's got a lot of